In a world overflowing with distractions, we seek meaning. How do we transform ambition into something deeper, into true fulfillment? I'm Sam Pepin, CEO of Centrica, and I've spent years helping businesses succeed by connecting their goals to something bigger. On the Meaningful podcast, we explore not just how to win in business, but how to grow as individuals. Through conversation with thought leaders, innovators, and everyday heroes, we uncover the stories that drive us towards something greater. Whether you're striving for success, seeking purpose, or just looking for the next steps in your journey, this podcast is your guide to navigating the intersection of ambition, growth, and meaning. So please join me and our incredible guests as we redefine what's possible in both business and life. Enjoy. The real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscape, but in having new eyes. Welcome to the Meaningful Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Pepin, and today we're exploring powerful themes, which are visionary leadership in modern media, building a legacy for independent creators, and embracing change with purpose and passion. Our guest today is Julianne Meyer. She's the Chief Strategist Officer and VP of Programming at E360 TV. With a wealth of experience in media strategy and monetization, Julianne is at the forefront of empowering content creators with her innovative streaming platform. As a bestseller author and host of Sizing Your Greatness, she offers transformational insights to those looking to make a greater impact in media. If you enjoyed this discussion, please let the world know with a like, a small review, or even a quick share. Your support helps more people find meaningful content just like this. Let's begin. Ms. Julianne, welcome on the Meaningful Podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing so good. I'm so excited to be here with you today, Sam.
Absolutely. Well, it's fantastic to have you here. And we have both personal and professional relationships. And I think this conversation is going to be very, very interesting. First and foremost, to kick us off, tell us more about E360 TV.
Thank you for that question. I have been with E360 TV for quite a while, so I've been able to see the progression and growth. But ultimately, we are a place where we celebrate independent content creators, and we want to give them a platform so that they can get their message out to a larger, bigger audience. So that's what we do, and we want to just celebrate those people that maybe might not get seen otherwise.
Sure, absolutely. And you use a very interesting medium to do that. Obviously, kind of like this the TV medium, which is actually coming back very strong. Let me ask you an interesting question to start us off. A lot of people are actually talking, a lot of affluent people are talking about the fact that TV is drastically changing. Can you tell me more about, in your perspective, what's that change about and how do you see that unfold?
Oh, absolutely. I love this question because I think as a society, we are somewhat afraid of change. I mean, look at AI coming into the picture. Back in the day was a car or even an actual TV or a computer in the house. And this is just the next iteration as things grow and change. You know, there used to be Blockbuster, now there's Netflix. Then Netflix went to the TV. So what I do in streaming television is the next iteration, the next way of communicating, educating, and entertaining as well. So for me, I try and get people to, the content's there, so it's not up to me. But I really try to keep in mind who's watching and what can we do to make the viewers experience that much better. And by that, I mean something along the lines of, say, commercials. Those are a thing of the past. Unless it's Super Bowl, nobody wants to watch a commercial. So how can we still create income for the people working in the television industry and keep the interest and excitement for the people who are watching? So it's bridging that gap and creating a new wave and a way of doing things so that everybody involved is happy.
So, Julia, when you're thinking about this new wave of television, how do you think E360 TV is positioned towards that new wave, and what did that consist of?
I really love that question because, like you, I like to look into the future and see what's coming and be able to help create it versus riding the wave of what everybody else has created. And at E360 TV, we really have been very visionary and look for things that are missing in entertainment. The people that are underserved, the people that are not being seen. There is, for example, we just signed a contract with some MMA fighters to broadcast their fights, but they're not the professional. They're like the JV of that. So there's this whole subculture that loves and enjoys that sort of entertainment and sport. So we are bringing it to television. It's the same idea. When you think about, for example, there's singers out there in the world, and there's so many of them that are extremely talented, but they don't ever get that chance to be extra famous or super uber famous. So we are that intermediary where people can bring their message, their knowledge, their wisdom, and leave their legacy in a more lasting way on television. We're just kind of the in-between, completely professional and Wayne's World basement. So it's a really fun way to service the average person, the normal person, the one that is going somewhere and needs a break to get there.
Sure. And this visionary word is one that I absolutely adore. Obviously, I consider myself a visionary. I consider yourself also a visionary. In your words, being part of this visionary culture now for quite a bit of a few decades, how would you define that? What do you think is so special about the visionaries of this world?
You know, that's what's kind of interesting. I'm going to actually kind of quote one of my old mentors, and he was explaining to me, and he gave this story. He said, you know, when you are trying to create something new, people will call you crazy. They will think you're insane and say it's impossible. And then when you actually do it, they'll ask you how you did it. So there's always got to be the first person. It was considered impossible to run a 4-minute mile until it was possible. And if you ask the first gentleman who did it, he just said, well, I saw myself doing it. So it really is. It starts with our brain. It starts with what we think is going to be possible. We create it. What we focus on expands. So I'm not saying that, I mean, there is a difference between being delusional, but also being visionary and being able to see something that nobody else has created. I think everybody can be. We're just afraid to tap into that and we're afraid to maybe stand out from the crowd and create things that we imagine. And then somebody else does it, and we think, oh my gosh, I had that idea. But you, myself, and quite a few other people, we just go for it. So I think that's really the main difference between us and people who maybe don't act on their intuition and their ideas.
Right. And we live in such a fast-paced world nowadays that truly one of my best tips to anyone trying to be visionary is to closing that gap between an idea and action. When you think of something, I promise you, we are close to 8 billion people in this wonderful world. Somebody else is either about to get the same idea or is already thinking about it. So truly, God in the world benefits from the people that actually do things, that actually try things, that actually are trying to accomplish something greater. And when you're bringing your vision back to the meeting, and you think about the way that E360 got formed, what was the base layer, the mission statement, if you will, of even contemplating such a project?
Well, that's what's interesting is when our company first started out, it wasn't what it is now. And it's true for any business, with especially being an entrepreneur. If you have started in that world at all, you know that it's going to cost more than you expect it will and take longer than you think it will, guaranteed. And if you're too stuck on one idea, then you don't allow the magic to actually come through. And what needs to be created, be created. Because we all have ideas of what we want to create, and then the world says, well, maybe you should do this. So when E360 TV first started out, it was based more in the cannabis world. And exactly, it was so strange and not like a stoner type of situation, more of alternative medicine and healing, but it was based on cannabis. And we quickly discovered that that was way too small and we were excluding way too many people and it wasn't going to sustain itself. So we evolved and changed into what we are now, which is celebrating independent content creators. So that's really what we do. And we see something, we try and create it. So if somebody comes to me, for example, and they have an idea, we will spitball and figure out, okay, let's see how we can make this happen so that it will work for you and work for the audience and also work for E360 TV.
Right. That's it. That's quite a drastic change of pace when you're thinking about it. How long was how many years basically between the two, the first idea in the cannabis world to all the way to switching to content creators?
It was about a year. We've been and here's the thing, we've been around for 8 years. So even though we are considered trailblazers and considered ahead of the pack, this is not actually a new idea. This is something that is just becoming more popular now. So all of these overnight successes take 10, 15, 20 years.
That's right. Absolutely. When you're thinking about, let's dive deeper into it. Mentally, when you're prepared to launch a new business, anything basically new, like you said, there will be more resources needed to deploy it, no doubt. How did you guys, especially the leadership, how did you guys basically keep your head above water and say, you know what, we're going to make this drastic shift and try to bring this new vision? We're still trailblazer, like you said. We bring this new vision, this new angle. How does that happen organization-wise?
Well, that's actually a really good question. And it does come back to being visionary and being open to suggestion, open to ideas, and really knowing your own strengths and recognizing the strengths in others. So I've been brought on into the leadership team fairly recently, but I've been a part of the company for quite some time. And just to see the growth, even from the beginning to now, it's as soon as something presents itself and we need an expert or we need somebody else who's even better, then we go find them. And it's really funny because when you are, and I know you know this, Sam, but when you are on mission, when you are doing what you are meant to do, the people come out of the woodwork for you. They magically appear and answer the problem. Sometimes it costs more than you want it to. But honestly, it is about growth and it is about taking calculated risk. Not being risky, but taking calculated risk and moving the marker forward in an educated, and also it's an educated way, but also it's always going to be a little tricky and scary because you don't know if it's actually going to work. Because if we were sure things were going to work, everybody would do whatever it was that we wanted.
No, I love this. Taking calculated risks. What would you say is the main difference in your mind between an uncalculated risk and then a calculated one?
There is definitely a difference. So for me, taking a calculated risk is looking at all of the angles and then deciding, can I live with the possible results? And if it means possibly, I don't know, that I'll go bankrupt if it doesn't work out, I'm okay with that. But if my employees can't pay their bills and all of a sudden they're homeless, I'm not okay with that. So if there's a possibility, I have to take that into consideration. So that's kind of what I mean by a calculated risk. Does it make sense? Can I recover? Will I be able to take care of things if things don't work out? What is the worst? And then the other part of that too is sometimes if I'm going to make a risky move, I will talk with other people and see if they're on board with me, with the vision. If they're willing to take the risk along with me, because it's never going to be on an island by yourself. It's always going to be with other people. If you want to move fast, go alone. If you want to move far, go together. So it's always going to be a together proposition. So always just look at all of the options and then choose.
Right. I love what Charlie Munger, rest in peace, by the way. I love what Charlie Munger said about this, which is when you're considering risks, ask yourself everything that if you want to make it the worst venture possible, right? What would those be? Because our brain is incredible at recognizing negative. That's why you might have 1,000 comments, 990 of them are positive, but 10 of those are negative, and you're just you're pissed after reading them. It's we have a very much of a risk averse type of brain, and that's obviously coming from biology. But this idea in which you can calculate risk not only on the positive but on the negative is so important. Something that any leaders with a vision should learn to do effectively. When you're thinking about your own life, and I'm sure you had obviously small goals before you jump into a leadership one, like everybody. What would you say is the difference, the main difference between a follower and a leader in an organization, basically capacity?
I absolutely love that because a lot of people assume that the leader is the boss. And that is not necessarily the case. The boss is not always the leader. The leader is the person who is there guiding everyone else and being there to answer questions, being there to problem solve and be solution oriented. No matter where I have been in the totem pole of my title, I have always been a leader. People have always come to me to ask my opinion, ask me about my knowledge, and come to me for resources because I can help them. And I really truly believe that a leader is someone who thinks of others and wants to see them succeed, wants to see them shine, wants to help them get where they're going. There's this term, because I used to work in addiction recovery, and there's a term that I absolutely love. And they say that if you want to keep what you have to give it away. And I feel like that is true with knowledge, time, and resources.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, that reminds me of one of my favorite quotes of all time by Jim Rohn, which is, in order to have more than what you have, you need to become more than who you are. And when you're thinking about this own journey of self growth within the E360 TV, but outside of it as well, what would be some ways in which you keep your mind sharp, you keep your body sharp? What's your best tips on self improvement?
My best tips are, it's really important what you feed yourself. And I'm not only referring to food, I'm referring to what you're feeding your brain, what you're feeding your soul as well. It's not a one-stop proposition. It is, how are you feeding every component in your life? I hate the term balance. I don't think that, I think there's no such thing as balance. I believe in harmony. I believe that things can work congruently together. If I'm putting my energy in one thing, then that means I'm putting less in the other. Am I okay with that? So that's how I think of harmony. That's how I think of self-improvement. I always want to be reading and learning something new. And if I have an aversion to something and my brain wants to shut down, that's when I dig in deeper, because there's something in there that I don't want to see. So maybe it can open my eyes even further, so I have a different, more broad viewpoint of the world. It's kind of like living abroad. If you've never lived abroad, you have a very different mindset because you just know where you've been. It's very different in Europe. It's very different in Africa. The lifestyle is very different. And when you see different people's way of being, then it really opens up your mind. So for me, I think it's really important to feed your body, to feed your mind, and to feed your soul, and whatever that looks like for you. Are you putting diesel in an unleaded engine, or are you putting unleaded in an unleaded engine to keep it running the best that it can?
Wow, yeah, powerful segment. I've never thought about it this way. So let's dig deeper a little bit. So perhaps your understanding is harmony is making sure that everything you're working on is basically working simultaneously, and I suppose optimizing through symbiose. And balance for you will probably be actually trying to force everything to be equal for the sole sake of being equal. Would that be right?
That's absolutely correct. And it's virtually impossible. You are going to fail. Absolutely going to fail at some point. And if you have that expectation, then nothing will succeed because you're trying to put a little bit of yourself everywhere versus really focusing. So for example, if it's work time, I am 100% in work time. If it's family time, I'm 100% in family time. If it is fun or exercise, I'm 100% there too. It doesn't mean that I'm ignoring the rest of my life. It just means that I'm present for where I am in that particular moment.
Beautiful, beautiful. One thing that I absolutely adore about, and I talk about this very often, but seeing people in timelines, basically the past, the present, the future. You just mentioned something super interesting that I want to reflect on, which is the life is always lived 100% in the present when you want it to be as meaningful as possible. When you think about the past, obviously you're thinking about what you could have done better. When you're thinking about the future, you're very anxious. So the present is truly where it's at. That being said, theoretically, it's way easier than actually doing it practically. So how did you learn? But most importantly, how would you say, ideologically speaking, is a way in which you can start to live in the present now?
I love that question. It's obviously, well, meditation is a practice and being present is a practice. There's no end goal. I don't get there and I'm finally there. It's something that it's continuously bringing myself back to the present moment. And there's so many different ways to do that. If I'm thinking, we're having a conversation and I'm thinking about what I'm going to eat for lunch later, am I actually present? No, I'm not. How can I move myself back to the present moment? Noticing that I've wandered mentally, maybe moving my fingers and feeling my body so that I am back into my body versus my brain. So that's something that I do. And then I also set aside, I didn't come up with this term, but I absolutely love it. It's called think-atate. So I have my think-atate time where I literally sit down and genuinely think. I don't let my mind run wild, but I think about a specific topic and dig deep and figure out what my thoughts are, what my ideas are, and allow the universe to work through me during that time. So I know that if I tend to wander, I can think about whatever that is during that time. So it makes it easier for me to come back to the present moment.
And go and let God, no doubt. It's already the second time meditation is mentioned in this podcast. It's very interesting. Most of the high performer that I come across absolutely adore and practice some type of meditation or meditation, whatever you want to call it. Why do you think it is so key and it's embraced to such an incredible extent by the people that actually change the world?
Well, I always think about it like this. Meditation is something that I've always sort of fought with. And the reason why is because, is my brain running me or am I running my brain? There's a difference between the two. And when I sit down to meditate, all of a sudden I decide my nose itches. It didn't itch before. I have to go to the bathroom. I didn't even drink anything. All of a sudden I think about how I have these chores to do and my brain wants me to do anything but sit there. And to be able to sit through it and actually, as they call it, it's a good sit, as they call it. It's a good thing because I managed to be in charge of my brain. Now, not everybody feels comfortable with meditation. So there's something I learned from a mentor years ago, and I thought it was really interesting, just so you can see how your brain works. And what he did was he said, okay, I'm going to do something completely benign every single night before bed and listen to what my brain is telling me as I'm doing this. So he has a 2-story home, and right before bed, he would go downstairs, unlock, and lock the door again to the front of the house. Even if he knew it was locked, he would do the same thing. And every single time, his brain would say something about, who's going to know if you don't do it? Or, why am I doing this? This is pointless. And it was very interesting and I did it. And it was very interesting to learn how our brain plays tricks on us and how we can be in charge of it. It's the same idea with meditation. So it's us becoming in charge of our brain versus our brain being in charge of us.
Right. It's interesting you mentioned this the fight word because I feel the exact same thing, right? When you're trying to meditate, especially as a high performer, and thinking about so many things that you don't even acknowledge that you're thinking about so many things before you actually stop. And now you understand just how much you're thinking about, and which is very interesting. And I think that's this pause, this intention of actually let me do things right and let me do things right now, so I don't need to redo them. That's another thing that I always consider is if I do it right now, even though when I'll do way more things than if I do a couple of things here and there, nothing truly advanced basically outside of that. So that's always something to keep in mind. You mentioned mentor twice already in this conversation. Why do you think mentors are so meaningfully important in anyone's life?
Because we don't do life alone, and there's always somebody who knows something better than we do. And if we want to get where we want to go and have a result we haven't had, then we need to learn. And that's really what life is about. And for me, I want as much in-person learning as possible. Don't get me wrong, I love my books, but I love my person-to-person mentor and coach. And any way that I can create a relationship and gain knowledge at the same time, I think it's truly the best way to become successful.
Wow. It's definitely an investment in yourself. This understanding of knowledge is so powerful. And let me ask you this: when you say in person knowledge, when in person basically learning in person, um, do you think there's a drastic difference between learning online and learning in person? If it's the case, what would you say are the main ones, and how do we can tap into both perhaps?
So I'm all for any kind of learning. I love online learning. I love in person. The difference for me between the two is the energy of the room. I can get the same exact knowledge. However, and it's true, I can get the same exact knowledge online that I can in person, but I don't get the same experience while I'm learning it. And for me, I want to make life as much about the experiences as I possibly can versus just the end result, which is what I learn.
Right. When you think about Julianne, when she started on that quest of self improvement and life in general, would you say that actually making meaningful connections and trying to get on your way to have these type of experience is it in your top priority at that time? Tell me more about how that involved within your title, within your I suppose responsibilities as well.
Well, for me, it was more about, in the beginning, it was more about being okay in my own skin. It was more about actually enjoying the life that I have and making the most of what I have and creating more of what I wanted. And in order to do that, I needed to change who I was being and how I was showing up in the world and my perception. So all of those things were created through learning, through self-improvement, through trying different things that make me uncomfortable and experiencing different experiences. Now, part of that was I wanted to feel safe, and part of being safe is being successful and having money. And a lot of people assume that once you have the things, then you'll be happy. But anybody who has gotten the things and are still not happy realize, oh my goodness, this is an inside job. And for me, early on, I discovered that while I enjoy, say, traveling, if I am not doing it and experiencing it with somebody or creating those relationships while I'm away, it's not nearly as meaningful or fulfilling. And so the relationship aspect of everything, business, personal, familial, and all of it, it's all my number one priority because it's how I'm getting to where I'm going. It's the journey versus the destination.
Right. It seems to me like most of your fulfillment and how you understand it is this beautiful world sharing. It's you mentioned a few times already when you're thinking about sharing, especially with other human beings. How can you create these relationships? Can be both professional and outside of it. But what would you say the most important things when you're contemplating creating a relationship with somebody?
So what I think about is I used to, and I'm not saying I'm not now, but I used to be extremely judgmental, and I could have missed some really phenomenal people if I had written them off because of my judgments. Some of my best friends, some of my best supporters and colleagues, if I just went with my base assumptions on who they were, then I would have missed out on so many opportunities, financial, emotional, spiritual, all of those things. And so for me now, what I do is look for the similarities, look for what we have in common and how we can be together, what makes sense for our time together. So now it's more about being positive and creating versus complaining. So that's number one.
Interesting. Tell me more about the relationship that you have between this idea of perceptions, of positive perception, and afterwards positive implementations. Tell me more about these two worlds kind of like colliding. How important do you think perception truly is?
I think that it definitely depends on how you look at things, because I'm going back to taking this a little bit bigger, where what you focus on expands. So if you are focused on something negative, you are going to find it. You are going to find the negative in the world. If you are focused on finding the positive, finding success, finding happiness, finding all of the universe will respond in kind. So it's the same thing with relationships. If I am looking for the good in people, that tends to bring out the good in the person. That's because that's going to be my experience. That's what I'm going to see. And there have been so many times, I'll give you a perfect example. When I was in high school, I was going to prom with my high school sweetheart, and my dad videotaped it with the old camcorder because I'm older, and he videotaped it. And I remember being there in that moment thinking, wow, he doesn't think I look pretty. And I was so upset this whole night because I thought he wasn't attracted to me. And then I looked at the video maybe a year or two later, and all I could see was love and adoration in his eyes. So it really showed me that just because I saw it that way didn't make it true. So to realize that not every thought that I have about someone or something is accurate really changed my perception and how I see the world. And I'm going to assume the best of everyone. Assume the best, and honestly, negative things have really slowed down ever since that because I am looking for the positive. I'm looking for the good things. And if I assume the best in people, if something happens that I don't deem appropriate or I feel offended in some way, we can always work through it because I assume that there's a misunderstanding on my part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't see the world for what it is. You see the world for who you are. And it's so interesting to me because you're talking about perception and this understanding of when you seek positivity, when you seek morality, you typically tend to find it. How important do you think that is in business? Coming back to the business topic here, when you're thinking about this beautiful vision in which you want to portray and you want to implement, and you understand that obviously on the road of success will be a bunch of the other bumps, as I like to call them. How would you say is the best way to keep that positive mindset and trying to always basically perceive the world for something that is shareable and meaningful for everybody involved?
Oh, goodness. Okay. So I actually have an example, a real-time example. So I was recently at a conference and I created an opportunity for someone else to do a TV show with E360 TV. And during our call yesterday, he informed me that another person at the conference had said, why don't you put that idea on ice and work with me for now, and then you can work with E360 TV. Now, as a business person, and that to me is not an appropriate way to be. It's not an appropriate way to show up in the world. There's more than enough abundance than anything. And anyway, my point though about that is that I could respond as being angry, or I could respond in the way that I did. And I wrote her a very nice email and said that that was brought to my attention, and I see it as an opportunity for us to collaborate. Why don't we come up with an affiliate program so that we can refer each other and build business and be a strong, united front versus telling people to go one way or the other? And I'm waiting to hear back, but why not create opportunity out of something that was not necessarily good?
Right. When you're thinking of that's what I call solution making. So basically, somebody came back to you and said, "You know what? I'm contemplating another options, another idea," which will happen very, very often, by the way, in the business world, obviously, especially in this modern days of pretty much anything being accessible if you truly, again, try to seek it. When you're thinking about the resilience that it takes to actually show kindness, show perhaps excitement for something that you were on the wall about, like you said, you don't think it's the right way to show up in the world. How would you say is how important is that basically in a leader when you're trying to put everything in place that organization basically was? How important would you say is having this kind of heart, having perhaps the art on your head, as we like to say in French? Is that something that you keep in mind when you're surrounding yourself leadership wise?
Absolutely. I'm always thinking about, who do I want to be when nobody is looking? How do I want to show up? How do I want to be? Just because somebody else does something doesn't mean that I need to respond in the same way that they are. So if I'm staying true to myself and acting with kindness and assuming the best in other people, then that's how I need to show up as well. So I don't react, I respond to other people, and I decide who I want to be and how I want to show up in the world, because you never know how you might influence somebody in a positive way by just being yourself. I think a lot of us are trying to do more in order to be influential. However, just showing up, there's always somebody watching, always. Whether you realize it or not, there's always somebody watching. And if I want to put my head down on my pillow at the end of the night and feel comfortable with who I've been and what I've done, then I'm going to act in alignment with that. So to me, if I'm doing that, then even somebody who maybe doesn't have the same business practices as I do will see that and alter the way they do things as well. And if they don't, then that's up to them. I mean, it's their life. But I surround myself with everyone, and as long as we have a mutual understanding of how we're going to treat each other, then I'm okay with them just being themselves.
Sure. I think the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. And when you're talking about showing up and doing the best that you can with this situation that is given to you, I also consider that somewhat the law of attraction. This idea in which from the idea in which basically what you seek is attracted by the person you become by trying to find it. What's your relationship with the law of attraction and the perhaps other laws of the universe as well?
Well, I think it's like gravity. Whether or not we believe it to be true, it is true. So am I going to use it to my advantage or am I not? And so with the law of attraction, it's kind of like the law of reciprocity, or, to me, it's all about, at the end of my life, am I going to look back and be proud of who I was or not? Am I going to be proud of who I helped and what I left behind me? And so the law of attraction is a part of that. If I want to but I don't do it in order to get. I do it in order to be. And automatically I understand that it will come back to me in the same fashion. And I think too, with business in particular, a lot of people don't realize this. Let's say I am paying a certain coach for something, and I feel like maybe I didn't get what I needed from that relationship. It's going to be paid back to me from a different source. And if I think about it like that, I never feel like I'm losing. So if it's coming back from somewhere else, I just keep my eyes open. So it's the same idea. I don't need to have it back from exactly where I'm giving it.
Interesting. You don't see a lot of attraction for what it can get you, but for who it can make you become. Tell me if that was a very powerful statement. Tell me more about that relationship between being and getting, and how intentional you should be towards it.
Well, I think it's kind of like a law of physics. An object in motion stays in motion. So I think that when we start doing and being a certain way, it just becomes natural, and that there's a momentum to it, and it feeds itself. So if I am considering myself, let's say I'm not a smoker, for example, but let's say I was quitting. There's a huge difference between saying I'm not a smoker and I'm trying to quit. Because a non-smoker doesn't smoke. I'm a non-smoker is totally different than I'm trying to quit smoking. So yeah, maybe I am trying to, and I'm not smoking at the moment, but I am a non-smoker. So it's the same idea with anything in business, with life. It's the same idea. I want to speak more powerfully into existence who I am and who I'm becoming as more of a powerful statement as opposed to what I don't want. And that's really how I kind of look at the law of attraction as well.
Identity building is so powerful. The example you just gave is the first time I hear it actually was from Tony Robbins. Maybe you saw maybe a different example, but that's where I found it. And it is so important, because in identity building, when you're in harmony with who you are and what you're trying to see, there are non-negotiable, which obviously are called boundaries. That those boundaries ought to not be crossed. It's just the way it is, and it's part of who you are as entrepreneur and as human beings. How would you say the most meaningful way to set these boundaries for yourself, but for the external world?
I really love that question, and nobody's ever asked me that before. It's kind of hard, because a lot of the times I don't have a lot of hard and fast rules when it comes to how I do business. But there are some. Is it ethical? Is there integrity involved? So as long as it falls under those two umbrellas, as long as everyone in the situation is winning, then I'm okay with it. But how we get there can look different. There's more than one way to get to the finish line. And I'm open to suggestion and ideas, because sometimes just because I've done something a certain way all my life doesn't mean it's the best way, and doesn't mean there isn't a new way that I can try that would actually work better for me. So I am always open to relationships being fluid, as long as, like you said, those basic things for me are met. And I don't believe in burning bridges, even if somebody has burned me. I will not. I will never speak poorly about anyone. None of that. I will not do that, because I wouldn't want somebody to do that to me.
Yeah, you seem like a very forgiving person. That's something that we can all learn from, no doubt. There's an interesting idea, which is hire for character and train for skill. Would you say as a leader, obviously in E360 TV, and as you see the company growing, would you say that that's a key component of how you guys build your team?
100%. I've never heard it put that way, but skills can be taught. And and also, especially in the business world, we probably want things done a certain way. So to be able to help mold somebody is a phenomenal place to be. But I also want to hire somebody who's better at things than I am. I want to be able to have them shine and uplift them and honor their skill set and who they are as a human, because who doesn't want to be seen, loved, and appreciated, first of all? But also, if we're creating a vision together, if we're creating something important together, then I want them to be as invested as I am.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. And it's interesting. You mentioned the I want to hire somebody that is better than I am. When you're thinking about that better world, excuse me, inside of obviously the skill conversations. It takes some great self-awareness to be even able to contemplate that perhaps somebody is better than yourself. That's first. But then how does that coexist with the idea of, well, you're better than me in X perhaps, and I'm better than you in Y, and perhaps other people in your team is better than you in Z. I love this idea of genius lanes when you're building a company. So you're the better at doing XYZ tasks. Focus on it as much as you can, and perhaps outsource the rest of things that perhaps you're not good at and you don't have the intention of being good at. Would you say that when you're thinking about how you run operations, because I know you do, and you're somebody that people trust and comes and go to when they need things, when they need resources of any kind. Would you this outsourcing mindsets and truly focusing on that special sauce, that special genius that only you hold? Would you say is a favorable mindset and a favorable framework for success?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's just really important too that while I have a slightly different take on the zone of genius. Yes, I think that 100% that's what we should focus on, but I also believe in following our interests. And because you never know where that's going to lead. So I may not be good at video editing, for example. However, I have an interest in it. So I'm going to dabble and play and see where that leads and see if that could, I don't know, improve my skill set in general or lead me down a different pathway. I just believe in following the magic, following what it doesn't have to make sense. I don't have to be good at everything. I don't have to always stay in my zone of genius. I want to grow and expand so my zone of genius grows and expands. So I think that is also an important part of it. So if somebody comes to me and says, hey, I really want to try this. Okay, let's try it. Let's see how this is going to work. Let's, we'll improve upon it. We'll just, I don't know, let's just try it. Let's go for it, because you have to be willing to look like an idiot. You have to be willing to fail by the normal definition of it. As long as you pick yourself up, though, you just realize, oh, well, maybe that wasn't the way, or I'm going to go back to my zone of genius.
No, absolutely. It reminds me of Einstein's quote, which is it's better to ask a question and to look like an idiot for that moment than to not ask it and to keep being ignorant for your whole life. My good friend, she's in HR, Erin. If you see this, she has this thing called the Sapphire quadrant, and the Sapphire quadrant is basically you have the genius phase, which is things that you're prolific at and you love doing. Then you have the shiny objects, which are things that you want to be better at. You're not that prolific right now, but you have a strong interest towards. Then there is the tedious, basically part of the equation, which is at the bottom left, which is things that you're very good at doing, but it bores you, right? Maybe you've been doing that for a long time, you just don't want to do it anymore, so you're a little bit less basically attracted to it. And then there's just basically this complete cancel zone of you're not prolific, you don't want to be prolific, and you're not good either, right? So just don't do it, avoid it at all costs. That's something that we use inside of Corecentrica to basically delegate, because you're absolutely right. When there's somebody that is have a strong interest to actually pick up a skill, we don't want you to enter that by saying, well, actually no, let's say you're a programmer, just program all day and do nothing else. We're not robots. We have this intrinsic interest in other things, and many of them are things that we're not good at yet. How can people, though, make sure that they focus on something to be good enough so that they can achieve whatever interest that they have, instead of perhaps this kind of like meal piecing personality? I'm just trying to get there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just trying to pick up your brain. Would you say that in this modern times there's a difference, because it's more valuable to be a very, very great specialist? I mean, still that there's still great places for polyvalent and jack of all trades.
I love that because as an entrepreneur, I have many, many interests, and I happen to be good at different skill sets that don't necessarily go together. So it is a matter of, what am I going to focus on? Because I don't want to be mediocre at everything. I want to be really good at what I'm going to spend most of my time on, because I am literally exchanging my life for this. So if I think about it like that, it makes my decisions a lot easier. And I try and instill that in the people that I work with as well, because you're exchanging your life for this particular moment. How are you spending it? At the end of your life, are you going to be happy that you binge watched Netflix, an entire series in one sitting? Or would you be more fulfilled by reading 3 books during that time? How do you really want to spend your time? It's the same thing in business. Like you said, how you do one thing is how you do everything. So for me, if it's an interest, then I'm going to spend less time with it. I'm going to spend more time with what I am more focused on or interests me more. Now, that being said, I've spoken to a few different people recently who happen to be, they have like 5 or 6 different businesses that are all extremely successful. All of them. So now in the coaching world, they're trying to figure out how they're going to translate that. And the best thing that I think about, the way to handle it is, what are you going to lead with? You don't have to sell everything in the very beginning. What are you going to lead with? And then once you've built this relationship, you can bring in other opportunities and let them know about these other opportunities. You don't have to give them all the choices in the beginning. So it's just, why a confused mind doesn't buy. So why not just build the relationship? Because ultimately that's what it is about, and be of service. And then when you see that you have these other opportunities that will fit well with this particular person, for example, then you bring it up. So I always lead with something and then follow up with the others.
Interesting. That's so powerful. Live a life in which you're going to be proud of. What's your relationship with the proud words? It's always a very interesting conversation to me. Many people has different angle on it. For you, Julianne, first of all, what makes you proud? But then tie this into your definition of why proud is so meaningful and important.
I'm glad you asked that question, because proud is a sticky word, and it definitely it means different things to different people, much like the word success does. For me, being proud of something is different than being prideful. And there's a huge difference. It's not ego-centered for me. Having pride in something is not ego-centered. I am proud of things that I have nothing to do with, in fact, because of how it is affecting the world or how other people are behaving and making things better for other people. So for me, it's, do I appreciate, do I acknowledge and adore and love whatever this is, whether it's a character trait, whether it is an actual object or an activity or something that I'm doing. Am I proud of it? Would I talk about it and give it away as well? Or do I want to hide it?
Interesting. You seem like such a humble person, and you mentioned this difference between, again, being proudful and being proud of something. You also mentioned ego, which is another very interesting concept, because I've seen some extraordinary, basically successful people with quite the ego, and I've seen some extraordinary, unsuccessful people with quite the ego as well. So to me, it's definitely not the main measurements of success. But for you, like I said, as what I perceive to be a very delicate, very sharing, very generous type of person, what's your relationship with ego, and how important is that in this marketplace?
Well, for me, I think ego gets in the way because I'm making it about me, and instead of thinking of the bigger picture. Because it goes back down to, is somebody else better for this position? Is somebody else better suited for this? And if I am so busy worried about getting my feelings hurt because of my ego, then am I really being of service to the people around me. If there is somebody who is better suited, if there is somebody that can get the job done in a better way and be more successful in it, then that to me is where ego steps in. Am I going to allow it? I'm not saying that my feelings won't get hurt or I'm not going to be upset, but I am saying that if I can just see it as a big picture and instead of just as me, as the center of the universe, then life gets a lot easier.
It's so interesting because last year I went to a beautiful conference in Scottsdale, Arizona, and there was this very powerful speaker, Carlos and Kara. If you listen to this, I have nothing but admiration for you, my friend. And he was the first one to actually tell me that ego means edging God's out. I don't know if. Again, I'm sure it's factual, but I never, and I'm also French, obviously, but I've never hear it say this way in definition-wise. And to me, I completely share your opinion. To me, there's a place for ego or misunderstanding that you believe in yourself enough to be able to do great things and therefore better the world through it. But ego is definitely a very fine line, because if you make it about you, and if you take basically a bigger importance into how you actually look and how you actually are, there is definitely a lot of downfalls that comes to that. And you're obviously a very successful person. How do you keep your head above water and try to level yourself out to make sure that you have that just the right amount of ego and perhaps what I call self-confidence with an ego to perform at the highest level, but then such a sweet and loving heart? Tell me more about that relationship and that balance, that harmony, excuse me.
Absolutely. And it's something that I truly do struggle with, but not in the too much way, in the too modest way.
Right. I can see that. Definitely can see that.
I always try and remember, though, that if I don't suit up and show up for the day, if I do not let people know how I can help them, if I do not be an example, then somebody else may not be able to live up to their potential as well, if I don't let them know what's possible. So once again, when I think about things I'm proud of and my accomplishments, and I feel like I don't want to brag or something like that, I think about how many people have come up to me and said, "Oh, I'm so glad you shared this. Now I want to do this too." And if I don't make it about myself, if I make it about helping other people, then that keeps me able to show up for this podcast, for example. Who am I not to show up versus who am I to? And if I think about it that way, then I am a lot more able to talk about things that I do know about, it's not being humble if I'm hiding.
Interesting. It's not being humble if I'm hiding. Tell me, extend your thoughts a little bit on that.
Absolutely. So, for example, if I write a book, and I'm in a couple of books, if I don't tell anybody about it, why did I write it? It's a vanity project for me and me alone. I have got to tell people about it so that it can make the impact that I want it to make. I have got to share what I have inside of me in order for it to move forward and on to the next generation. I would be doing a disservice if I did not share my gifts with other people.
Right. So in many ways, being too humble might be selfish in this understanding in which you're not sharing it to the full extent and therefore impacting as many lives as you could, right?
Correct. That's exactly how I have to look at it, because I don't want to talk about my accomplishments and things that I've done. I would rather just talk to you about you and what you're trying to accomplish. But also, why would you listen to me if you have no idea what I've done or who I am? So there is that fine line. And there's a huge difference between, I think, the intention behind sharing. If my intention is to brag and say, look at me and what I've done, look at how amazing I am, that's different than look at what I've done and you can do it too.
Wow. That's so powerful. I heard this quote from an unknown writer. Perhaps audience, if you know who it is, I'd love to research it more. But it's I always treat people like how good I believe they can be, which is a very interesting point because when I look at my personal life, I'm a 20-year-old, obviously CEO and founder of an very interesting trailblazing company. You always have this weight on your shoulders of managing people and managing opportunities and making the most of them and so on. And what I've been seeing more and more in my life, and how perhaps I value how good a relationship is treat people in a way in which you understand how good they can be. What that means for me is they might not be basically where you think they can be as of right now, the present tense, but your belief, your perception in which they can become that stud, right? It can become him or her, as the youngster like to say, is so important and so impactful, not into their life, but in your life, because you now have a perspective in which you can embrace through any human soul in an understanding in which you can derive value from any relationship, no matter where they are, who they are, or how they are. Those are all so any question that are so painfully meaningless compared to the understanding of who they are, where they're going, and how can we better the world together. When you're thinking of your personal life at this present moment, if you had to share a little bit more about how you see the next 5 to 10 years unfold, you're very obviously high achiever yourself, and I'm very eager and excited to see how those years come by for you. What would you say is your most meaningful goal?
Wow, I love that. I've always struggled a little bit with this because whenever I get too focused on a particular goal, I miss big opportunities. So it's a fine line between having a vision of where I'm going, because I need to have that, and also being open to the opportunities that are coming my way, because it's never going to look exactly how we think it will. So if I'm not open to seeing how it is actually coming through, then I might miss it. And so that's been an experience for me in the past where I can look back and go, oh man, I could have gotten here faster. It would just look different, but it would have the same end result for me. So ultimately, my goals are to grow E360 TV into a media empire where independent content creators will have the opportunity to share their wisdom, their inspiration, their stories, and entertain people and grow their businesses in such a way that they will never worry about money. They will never worry about their impact on the world. And I just really want it to be a place that's accessible, but also quality. So right now it's really fun, and everything takes a little bit of time to get where you want it to go, but things are moving fast. And I love creating the next wave of what things are going to look like. And so right now we are creating E360 music, film, and documentaries as well. So we got 3 different divisions that are opening up. Actually, probably within the next month. And so it's really exciting because now we get to build all of those out and really just be a place for other people. Because a friend of ours, Jan Barlow, if you're listening, something she said that has really stuck with me, and I use this as my barometer for how I show up in the world, and is I'm living my legacy by helping other people live theirs.
Wow. Well, Ms. Julianne, it was an absolute pleasure to have you on a meaningful podcast. I admire your kind heart, your teamwork, your generosity, and overall just your visionary extent to all the projects you're a part of. Would you have any final thoughts for our audience, please?
Absolutely. I always love that question. And one that I always ask my audience or my guest is, what is the one question that you wish I would have asked you? And I heard that from someone else, and I just really love that. But ultimately, keep going. No matter what it is, if people are going to think that you look like an idiot because you haven't succeeded yet, if you stop, they're going to think you're an idiot. If you keep going, then they won't think you're an idiot. They're going to ask you how you did it. So just follow your intuition. Definitely you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You can definitely and should take the ideas of others that have gone before you, but make them your own and create your own legacy from that.
Thank you for spending your time with us today on the Meaningful Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review or share it with someone who could benefit from it. And always remember, your story matters. Make it meaningful. We hope to see you next time.